Today's daf is Ayin Bet. We're going to start on Ayin Aleph Amud Bet, 15 lines from the bottom where it says Shimona Minalan, or really Moshzar Shimona Minalan it should be. How do we know that when the Torah refers to, as we saw above in the previous daf, various different kinds of cloth have a different meaning. So, for example, it said in the Braita above that when it says Moshzar, it means Shmona. Whenever it says Moshzar, the reference is to threads, 8 threads that are woven into a single strand that are then used for producing whatever is Moshzar. Right? So then it said Me'il Shenem Asar. The coat of the Kohen Gadol was made of 12 threads that were woven into one single strand for each one of the strands. And then it said Parochet Esrim Ve'arba'ah. The Parochet was made of 24, etc., etc. So how do we know that Moshzar refers to 8? Okay, that's the question. Minalan dichtiv vayasu al shulei me'il rimonei techelet ve'argavan v'tola'at shani moshzar, because it says that on the coat of the Kohen Gadol, the me'il, were rimonei techelet ve'argavan v'tola'at shani, that there were these pomegranate-shaped bulbs that hung from the bottom of the coat of the Kohen Gadol, and they were made of techelet, argaman, which is some kind of a purplish fabric, v'tola'at shani, and a red fabric. Moshzar, they were moshzar. So how do we know that moshzar means, still we don't have an answer, how do we know that that means 8 strands? So where does it say 8? So ve'alif moshzar me parochet, because we learned it out from the parochet. The parochet is the curtain that hung in, separating the kodesh from the kodesh kodeshim. Just like when it comes to the curtain, there was a total of 24 strings. So too when it comes to the rimonim, these pomegranate-shaped items on the bottom of the coat, there were 24. And if there were 24, then the only way we can do that is the only way you can get 24 out of 3, because we have 3 types of fabric: techelet, argaman, tola'at shani. So the 3 have to equal 24, and we all know math. We all know that 3 times 8 is 24, and therefore that means that each one. So for techelet, you have 8 strands that are going to be in a single thread, combined into a single thread. For tola'at shani, you're going to have 8 strands combined into a thread. For argaman, you're going to have 8 strands combined into a thread, and that will be a total of 24 strands divided across the 3 types of fabric. But why do we have to learn it from the parochet? Why do we take 24 as our target number? It doesn't say 24 about the rimonim on the bottom of the coat. It doesn't say 24. You're learning that from the parochet. But maybe we can learn it from choshen ve'efod. Choshen ve'efod, that is the sort of apron and the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol. There you have how many strands? Not a total of 24, but a total of 28. How do you know it's not 28 in the rimonim? How do you know it's only 24? So the Gemara says, "Danin davar shelo ne'emar bo zahav midavar shelo ne'emar bo zahav la'pukei choshen ve'efod she'ne'emar behen zahav." There's a difference, because when it comes to rimonim, these bulbs, these pomegranates that are hanging from the bottom of the me'il, from the bottom of the coat of the Kohen Gadol, it never mentions anything about gold. And with the parochet also, the curtain that separates the kodesh from the kodesh kodeshim also doesn't have any gold in it. Whereas the choshen and the ephod both involve gold. And therefore we don't want to learn from the choshen and the ephod. We don't want to learn from the breastplate or the apron of the Kohen Gadol, because they have gold. So we'd rather learn from the parochet, which doesn't have gold and has only 24 strands, rather than learn from items that do contain gold and have 28 strands. So we learn from 24 and we divide it by 3, we get 8 of each. Adirabba, the Gemara says, no, danin beged mi beged lapuke parochet oelo. Why can't I argue the opposite? I'll say no. Why are you learning from the curtain, from the parochet? That's not even a piece of clothing. That's a piece of the wall that hangs from the wall. That's part of the oil. That's part of the structure. It's better to learn from the choshen and ephod. At least that's clothing. At least the Kohen Gadol wears that. So the Gemara says, okay, ela danin me'avnet. Rather, we learn from the belt. V'danin beged v'davar shelo nemar bo zahav mi beged v'davar shelo nemar bo zahav ve'in danin davar she'in bo zahav mi davar she'yesh bo zahav. So the Gemara answers, okay, we'll concede that point. Forget about the parochet. It's not about the parochet here. We're learning it from the avnet, the belt of the Kohen, not from the curtain of the Beit HaMikdash, because the curtain of the Mishkan, you're right, that's like a piece of furniture. It's not furniture, but it's a piece of the structure. So we want to find a piece of clothing of the Kohen Gadol that doesn't contain gold, because gold is a game changer, apparently. So we'd rather learn it from a piece of clothing, and specifically a piece of clothing that doesn't contain gold, since the rimonim at the bottom of the me'il also don't contain gold. So therefore the Gemara says we learn from the Avnet. Rashi explains the Yeshbo Nami Arba Minin, that there are 4 different types of fabric incorporated into the belt of the Kohen. V'kol echad kaful shisha, and when you put them together, each one is 6 strands. So of the 4 types of fabric, there are 6 strands of each. And they make a total of 24. So just like the Avnet has a total of 24, but of course there it's made up of how many different items? Of 4 items. And 24 divided by 4 gives you a total of 6. We have also a total of 24 strands, but they're divided across 3 items. And we know that 24 divided by 3 equals 8. So in the case of the rimonim, we have 8 strands for each one of the types of fabric of techelet, argaman, tola'at shani, and we get a total of 24. Rav Mari says, ta'asenu ketiv. Ta'asenu lazeh velo le'acher. It says there's another reason why we don't learn from the choshen. Why don't we learn from the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol that we need 28 strands? Why not? Not because of gold or not gold. It's not really that significant. The issue is it says ta'asenu, that you should make the choshen it, meaning that the choshen is unique. Don't make anything else like the choshen. The choshen has 28 strands, but nothing else does. Rav Ashi says, I'll give you another reason. V'asita ketiv. It says, you shall make it. What is it talking about? It's talking about the coat, right? We're back to our rimonim that are made. What does ve'asita mean? Sheyihiu kol asiyot shavot. That everything that you do with respect to the rimonim, in other words, you make these little bulbs on the bottom of the me'il, everything you do should be even, symmetrical, we could say. Okay, ve'echi navid, how are you going to do it? Navid if we make each one of the 3 types of fabric, 10 strands of each, it's going to be 30. Okay, Navid Tere, the Tisha, the Had Asara. If you're going to make 2 of them 9 and 1 10, okay, then you'll get 28. So in other words, what Rav Ashi says is very simply, since we want all 3 to have an equal footing, Techelet, Argaman, Tola'at Shani, we can't take number 28, because number 28 is not divisible by 3. So it doesn't work. Okay, so therefore we have to say 24. That's Rav Ashi's reason. But in any case, everybody agrees on the bottom line. The bottom line is that there are 8 threads or 8 strands of each fabric incorporated into what you're weaving the rimonim with. It's a single string, like when you look at the tzitzit, that it's made up of individual strands that are put together. Shizurim, we call it. There's no other word for that, right? They are put together. So too here, but it's made of 12 strands, as opposed to our tzitzit, which are not necessarily made of so many strands. Okay, so then the Gemara says, Me'il shenei masar minalan. So then the Baraita above, which we would have learned in yesterday's daf, for those of you who are keeping score and following the daf every day. So there are 12 strands in each fabric that is woven into the me'il, the coat of the Kohen Gadol. So minalan, where do we get the idea of that there should be 12? Tichtiv ve'asitat me'il ha'ifod kelil techelet. It says that you should make the coat of that accompanies the ephod, the coat that goes together with the apron, kalil techelet, it should be completely techelet. V'yalev techelet mi parochet, and the word techelet is emphasized over here by the coat, and it's also emphasized over there by the parochet, the curtain. Ma lehalan shisha, afkan shisha. And just like over by the parochet, you have 6 threads in each strand that's woven, so too here do you have 6 strands in each thread that's woven. Okay, and therefore what will happen? So since you have 6 strands in each, and you have 2 different kinds of fabric that are incorporated into the me'il, okay, because techelet, Rashi says, gedil ve'en gedil pachot mishanayim, even though it's only one type of thing, because it's kalil techelet. It's completely made of techelet. It's completely made of blue. Techelet, there's no other, it's not like with the Rimonim where you have Tolat Shani, Techelet, Argaman. Here it's completely Techelet, but Rashi says, in Gidil Pachot Mishanayim, since it says Gidil, that means it has to be made of 2. So there are 2 strands, each of which is comprised of 6 threads. That's the way that it works. Now the Gemara asks, Ma halan shisha, afkan shisha? But venilef mishulav, verimonav. Why don't we learn out from the bottom of the coat itself? We're talking about the coat, right? So why are we comparing the coat to the curtain? Why don't we learn from the rimonim? And what did we just say about the rimonim? Ma lehalan shmona, afkan shmona. That just like the rimonim, the little bulbous pomegranates on the bottom of the coat that hang down as a decoration, just like those are made of strands that contain 8 threads each, maybe the 2 strands that the coat are made of should also be made of 8 strands each for a total of 8 times 2 is 16. The Gemara says no. We don't do that. Why? Danin keli mikeli, ve'en danin keli mitachshit keli. Because we want to learn one complete entity from another complete entity, and not tachshit keli. We don't want to use the decoration of an entity. In other words, the parochet is an entity in its own right. The me'il, the coat, is an entity in its own right. But the rimonim, the pomegranate shapes, are just a decoration of another entity. They're not an entity in their own right. So we're not going to use them lidugma. We're not going to use them as an example. We're going to use the parochet. But then the Gemara says, no, adiraba, I'll switch it around. Danin gufo mi gufo, vein danin gufo mi alma. I'll say the opposite. That really, we could say that the rimonim are part of the me'il. Wouldn't you want to learn the me'il from its own self, so to speak? In other words, these pomegranates are hanging off of the coat, so maybe it should be congruous with itself. Just like it itself, in other words, just like its tachshit, its own decoration is made of 8 thread strands, so too should it be made of strands of 8 threads. Right? In other words, why are you looking to something else? Why are you looking at the parochet when you have attached to the me'il itself? We already said you have these rimonim. Learn from itself. So the Gemara says, "Hi, no damrinan." Good point. We take that point. It is a perfectly fine point. Hi, no damrinan on the Shabbat Gadim. Shelo nemar behen shesh. Okay, so that's why it says that any other begadim, in other words, any other items that it doesn't say, it doesn't give us information. Okay, shesh. So we automatically go with the default is 6. So since we're caught, we don't know what to learn from. Should we learn from the parochet? Should we learn from the rimonim? We don't know what to do. So anything else, when we don't know what to do, shar begadim, we say it's going to be 6. Okay? That's the basic rule. So parochet esrim va'arba'a. So we said that the parochet, the curtain, is made of 24 strands or threads. So the question is, why is that the case? Okay? So how does it work? So the Gemara says, we have dalid de shita. You have 4 strands, which are, in other words, 4 strands, each of which is made of 6 threads. Lo dina v'lo dayana. Lo dina is a funny language, meaning there's no judgment and there's no judge, meaning that's obvious. Since it tells us that the parochet is made of 4 different types of thread of fabric, and we know that we need to get to a total of 24, so it's very simple, right? 24 divided by 6, you get 4, so it's no problem. Or the other way around. So 24 divided by 4 is 6. So each one of the strands is going to be made of 6. But and then it says, then we come to choshen ve'efod, the breastplate and the the apron, they call it, right? Esrim u'shmona minalan. So where do you get that those are 28, like we mentioned before? Dichtiv ve'asita choshen mishpat ma'aseh choshev ke'ma'aseh efod ta'asenu zahav techelet ve'argaman ve'tolat shani ve'shesh moshzar. Okay, so it says that the ephod and the choshen are both made of the same material, which is gold, techelet, argaman, tolat shani, ve'shesh moshzar. And you have your linen, right? So arba'a de shita. So 4 of the fabrics are made of 6 strands or 6 threads each. In other words, there are 5 things mentioned there, right? You have gold, and then you have techelet, argaman, tolat shani, and shesh. So those four things, the last four things in the pasuk, which we would call the fabrics in the pasuk, excluding gold for a second, the fabrics in the pasuk, each one is going to be 6. That gives you 24, and then zahav arba'ah. So the gold is 4. So the gold is not 6, it's 4. So in other words, all of the fabrics are congruous. They're the same. Okay, the same number, 6. So that gives you 24. And then the last thing is gold. It's only 4
Techelet is the
threads.
color, not the material, right?
It's wool. Techelet is blue wool.
Okay.
Yeah, so it is both a material and a color. Mm-hmm. So specifically wool, though. How do you know that the gold is not also 6, which would bring you obviously to a total of 30 rather than 28? Amar Rav Chabar Yaakov says, Amar Kira, that you should cut petilim. You should cut these. Petilim is like we call it a thread, but petilim harekan daled. That petil, each one, Rashi says, petilim mashma teren. That the word petilim already sounds like 2. And so if you have 2 of these and you cut each one in half, what does it mean? 4. Right? Because it says, v'kitzetz petilim, you should cut 2 threads. So if you're cutting 2 threads in half, what are you getting? 4. So that means you have 4 petilim of threads, so to speak, of gold. You're going to have 4 threads of gold in the end. Ravashi says, Amar Kra, la'asot betocha techelet betocha argaman. It says that you should make the gold betocha techelet betocha argaman. You should make the gold within the techelet and within the purple fabric. Hechi na'avid. How should you do it? Na'avid arba'a ditre. If you make it 4, in other words, Rashi explains on the side. Navid arba'a haminin ditretre chutin shel zahav havuluhu temanya shel zahav. In other words, if you have 4, if this means that you should take 4 strips of gold, okay, and you take 2. In other words, Rashi says on the side here, Ni'avid arba'a haminin ditretre chutin shel zahav havuluhu temanya shel zahav. In other words, if you end up with 8 of gold. In other words, each of the 4 types get 2 strands of gold, right? That's one way of looking at it, right? If each one of the 4 gets 2 strands of gold, then what's going to happen? You're going to have a total of 8 strands of gold, right? So avalu temanya. So then you're going to have 8. Now vitre dehadhad. If you make 2 fabrics with 2 strands of gold each, and 2 fabrics with 1 of each, so you still hit your number of 28, right? That would be better, because what will happen is you'll end up still using only 4 strings of gold, but you'll end up with you'll end up with a congruous, you'll end up having more gold in some than in others. But you need it to be equal. So basically, what Rav Ashi says is, if you were to make it that each one of the 4 fabrics gets 2 threads of gold with it, so then you're going to end up with a total of how many threads of gold? You're going to end up with a total of 8 threads of gold, not the 4 that we're saying that you're supposed to have. And if you have, let's say, 2 threads of gold with the first 2 fabrics, and 1 for each of the other 2, so then what will you end up with? Then you'll end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right? You'll end up with 6 threads of gold. He says, but the only problem is that would mean that you have an uneven number. Some threads are getting 2 strands of gold, and some threads are getting 1 strand of gold. So what do we do instead? We say that each one of the fabrics should get 1.
How do we know that quality of Shavot?
Say again?
How do we know it's got to be equal for all?
He interprets the word ve'asita to mean that always. That's just how he's interpreting that extra word ve'asita that's repeated again and again to mean that they always have to be equal. So basically, the way that Rav Ashi says it is that it's the only way you can work it out that it's going to be that we will have a number that works. Because if apparently we can't have you can't have 6, because that would mean that you would have to distribute them unevenly. Okay, so if you have 4, you can distribute them evenly. So that's the way we're going to go. We're going to go with 4 that you can distribute them evenly, 1 strand with each one. Amar Rachava Amar Rav Yehuda. Rachava said in the name of Rav Yehuda, Hamekareya bigdei kehuna loke. Somebody who tears the bigdei kehuna gets whipped. In other words, it's considered a lo ta'aseh. Whenever it says loke, it means it's a negative commandment in the Torah. You're not allowed to tear the bigdei kehuna. How do we know that? Shenemar lo yikareya, because it says it should not be torn. The garment should not be torn. So then they asked a question. But Matkifla Rav Chabar Yaakov asked a question. Because what does the Torah actually say? The Torah actually says that you should make when you make the garment, you should make it lo yikareah. You should make it with an edge, lo yikareah, that it should not tear. So one way of reading lo yikareah is, it's just telling you, make the edge a certain way. Like if you have a hem at the edge, it won't tear. Right?
It's not just by the me'il.
What?
Isn't that just by the me'il?
But it would be, but I guess they're taking it as a general. That's what's most likely to tear, I guess, because it's hanging down. So it says mikativ lo. So the question is, if you interpret, in other words, you can read that pasuk not as a lo ta'aseh. Rav Chabar Yaakov is right. When you read the pshat, what do you read? Make an edge so it doesn't tear. You don't read it as a commandment not to tear, right? So the Gemara answers mikativ shel lo yikareah. Right? If it wanted to say that it was a practical, logistic thing, that we don't want it to tear, so then it would say, Shelo yikareah, so that it won't tear. It doesn't say that. And a similar teaching, Rabbi Elazar says, and according to what it says, it should say, Amma Rabbi Elazar, Hamaziach choshen me'al ha'ifod, it says, V'lo yizach ha'choshen me'al ha'ifod, right? You're not supposed to remove the choshen, the breastplate, from the apron. So it says, you're not supposed to remove it, and you're not supposed to remove the staves, the sticks that are inserted in the aron from it. In both cases it says a statement which is ambiguous to a certain extent. It could be interpreted as a descriptive statement or a prescriptive statement, because it says that the breastplate should not be moved from the apron. Does that mean you can't do it, or does that mean it should not be done, meaning that you should fasten it so that it doesn't happen? Similarly, with V'lo Yasuru, when it talks about removing the badim, Lo Yasuru mimenu, that you should place the sticks in the aron, Lo Yasuru mimenu, does that mean you shall not remove them, or does that mean you should put them in a way that it's secure so they don't fall out? What is it, describing or prescribing? So the Gemara is taking it here that it's a lo ta'aseh. Rabbi Elazar is saying it's a lo ta'aseh. If you move it, loke, shenemar lo yizach v'lo yasuru. He interprets it as a negative commandment. If you take out the sticks, you violated a negative commandment. You take off the choshen, you violate a negative commandment. The Gemara asks a similar matkivla. Rav Chabar Yaakov again has been learning parasha very carefully, and when he read this, he didn't see that. Right? He read the pshat. Vedel maki kama rachmana chadekinu v'avdinu shapir kedei shelo yizach v'lo yasuru. Maybe the Torah is just telling you, make sure to fasten these on carefully so they don't fall out. How do you know it's telling you a commandment, thou shalt not remove the staves? How do you know that? So the answer is that the Gemara, again, same answer, mikativ shelo yizach v'shelo yasuru. Does it say you should place the choshen on the ephod so that it doesn't fall off? Does it say you should put the sticks in so that they don't fall off? It doesn't say so that. It just says they shall not fall off, meaning it is a negative commandment. You should not remove them. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Hanina, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Hanina showed a contradiction between two pesukim. Ketiv betabeot aron yuabadim lo yasur mimenu. It says that in the rings of the aron shall the staves be placed; they should not be removed from it. Uchtiv, and it also is written, and according to Rashi, that the Bach brings here that it should be veheveta et abadim batabaot is the correct pasuk, not vehova et badav, which is from the wrong part of the Mishkan. It should be ve'vetat habadim, that you should place, or you should bring the badim, the staves, into the rings. In other words, you should place them. So in one case it says b'tabeot aron yuabadim lo yasur mimenu, but then it says ve'vetat habadim v'tabeot, implying that they came out and were put back in, implying that they're moving around, because it says you should put them in. So what's the answer? The answer is that they're movable, but they don't come out. In other words, Rashi says, they had thick ends. In other words, imagine something where it's thin in the middle, but thick on the end. So you could slide you can slide the sticks back and forth, but getting them out would be very difficult. It's actually not impossible, obviously, because they inserted them, but they're thick so that they would stick in. They're not going to come out, but since the rings actually rest on the thin part. Imagine an oar of a boat, for example, but let's say there's an oar on both ends. In other words, there's a thick part on both ends, and you place that in. So you could slide it within the rings a little bit, but it's never going to come out because both ends are thick. That's the way that Rashi interprets it here, meaning that they can slide, but they don't come out. Similarly, learned in a Braita, you might think from the fact that it says that these badim are affixed in place, that they can't move. And Rashi again says that should be badim. So evil vad badav, again it should probably be vehevetet badav yachol yu nechnasin v'yotzin. So you might think that means that you just slide them in and out at your leisure, whenever you feel like it. Take them out, take them in. No. That's why it says no, they have to be in there. So then what's the resolution? They can move, but they're not removed. Okay, so they can move, but not removed. Okay, so that's the compromise in the psukim. So when the pasuk implies that you're moving them, it means that they can be moved, slid while they're in place. When it talks about them not being removed, it means that they're never taken out. And if you'll recall, we learned a long time ago. I can't remember exactly what daf it was on now. But we learned not long ago that when they had the aron in the Bayit Rishon, they had the sticks, the staves, protruding out from the parochet like to Dadei Isha. It said like the bosom of a woman. Remember that? So they slid the staves forward so that they would poke out from the curtain that divided the Kodesh from the Kodesh HaKodeshim. So it's not obviously they moved while in place. Rabbi Chama said, what does it mean that the atzei shitim omedim, that the wood, that this is talking about the wood that was placed around to construct the Mishkan? It says atzei shitim omedim, that it was wood that was standing. Omedim derech gedilatan. What that means is that the wood was placed in the ground derech gedilatan. In other words, when they cut it from the tree, they had to place it vertically. In other words, they couldn't place it horizontally. It had to be placed the way that it grew. If it grew this way, this is the way it had to be placed in the Mishkan. It couldn't be placed at a different angle. It's similar to what we say about lulav and etrog. It has to be derech gedilatan. Same concept. Davar acher. Omedin. Why are they called omedin? Shema'amidin et tzipuyat. That remember, they are layered with gold. So what it means is that they hold up their gold. Rashi gives two explanations of this. Hazahav. Tzipuy hazav ma'amidin al yedei masmerot. That they hold the golden covering through nails or through whatever it is that attaches that golden covering to them. Okay, so in other words, they are a support for the gold. That's what it means. Or it means that it means that they never became wormy and rotten so that the gold fell off of them. Either way, it means that they hold up. Why are they called omadin? Because they support the gold that overlays them. Either that means because it was attached securely to them, or it means because they never rotted and therefore lost their gold. Another more symbolic interpretation, maybe you'll say that their hope is gone and their chance is gone. In other words, Rashi says, from the time that we lost the Mishkan, avad sivran shelo yashuvu od, our hope is lost, they're never going to come back. Batel sechuyan mashanu sochin v'tofin lain, what we hope for is going to never come back. That's why it says omedim, meaning meaning that they're going to come back. They exist forever. The Mishkan is going to come back. So why is it called atzei shitim omedim in the present tense? It means that they are still there, out there waiting to come back. Don't be worried. So here again, the Masorot Hashas corrects a little bit of the grammar. It should say Ve'amar. Ve'amar Rabbi Chama bar Hanina. Mai dichtiv et bigdei serad l'sharet b'kodesh. What does it mean, the bigdei serad? Now, normally, the word bigdei serad, actually, according to Rashi, it's very interesting. According to Rashi and Chumash, bigdei serad are actually were not the garments that the Kohanim wore, but were actually the garments or the cloth, the fabric that they covered the items, they covered the various implements of the Mishkan with. The Ramban shows in his Pirush on the Chumash that actually this sugya disagrees. This piece of Gemara clearly is interpreting the Bigdei Serad, the Sharet B'Kodesh, is referring to the Bigdei Kehuna. not what they covered the other stuff with, okay? But in any case, what does sirad mean? Rashi says this is obviously, again, this is homiletics here, but sarad means sarid, what's left over, not Yossi sarid, l'havdil. Yeah, sarid is left over, unfortunately, and that, but not to get into politics, but anyway, the sarid, lashon sarid, what does sarid mean? Left over. Okay? That why is it called Bigdei Sarad? Because if it were not for the Bigdei Kehuna, there would not be left from the Sonehen Shel Yisrael, from the haters of Israel, Saridu Palit, even a remnant or anything. So what is Sonehen Shel Yisrael? It's a euphemism for the Jewish people. Meaning, welcome back. Meaning that that the Jewish people would not have anybody left over if not for the Bigdei Kehuna that protect them in the zechut of the Bigdei Kehuna that we continue to exist. But the Gemara does not want to, God forbid, say that there wouldn't be left of the Jewish people even one remnant. So instead it says there wouldn't be left from the haters of the Jewish people one remnant, because it doesn't even want to say the Jews. But it's really a euphemism. It means that the Jewish people would not be around if not for the Bigdei Kehuna protecting them. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani Amar Dvei Rabbi Shmuel Tana. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani says that in the Dvei Rabbi, it actually could be Rabbi Shimon. Right? In the Shiva of Rabbi Shimon, it was taught Begadim shegoradinotan kebriatan. Okay, that miklehen. That what does it mean? It means that these begadim, when they were fashioned, why were they called sirad? Because when they would remove them from whatever equipment they used to produce them from the loom or whatever, they came off kebriatan. They came off in the complete form. In other words, they weren't made from pieces. That they fashioned them in one process to be complete. However, they left something. But there was something that they left over. Mahi, what was it? These were the needlework that had to be done. Okay? So in other words, when they weave it on a big loom. Needlework is done by hand. Okay, so the loom made the entire beged as one entity. They didn't make like a huge thing and then cut out of it the beged that was necessary. They just made the exact specifications that they needed on the loom. Okay, and then they left something. What did they leave? The maseh machat. So what does that mean? They raised an objection to that Bigdei Kehuna inosinotan maseh machat. Doesn't it say that the Bigdei Kehuna were not made by needlework? Ela maseh oreg. They were made by weaving. Shenemar maseh oreg. As it says, maseh oreg. It says that it was made by weaving, not by needlework by hand. Amar Abaye says, lo netzrucha lebeit yad shelahem. There was one exception, which was the sleeves. Kedetanya, as it says in the Braita, Beit Yad Shel Bigdei Kehuna ne'ereget b'fnei atzma v'nitbeged im ha'beged umagad al pisat hayad. That when it came to the sleeves, that was sewn on separately. In other words, so if you could imagine the me'il or whatever, or whichever beged we're thinking of, it was made with the body of it intact, but without the sleeves. And then the sleeves had to be made separately, and they were attached, they were sewn on the end. So they were sold separately. So and they went to the pisat hayad, which means they went down to the what do you call this? The palm. So, and just a little midrash agada, by the way, that is the real meaning, according to many of the pshat commentaries, of ketonet pasim of Yosef, was that he wore a beged that went down to his palm. And what is the meaning of a beged that goes down to your palm? It means that you're royalty, you don't have to work. When you're royalty, you don't have to work with your hands. You can have a beged that goes down to your hands. And I heard Harav Bin Nun once speak about that, and he said that was why the Ketonet Pasim was such an insult to the brothers. It wasn't just because it had colors or was fancy coats, It was because it symbolized he doesn't have to work. He's of the higher class, And so therefore, when he had the dream about working in the field, it was really a mockery, because they said, yeah, you're going to walk with a fancy coat. You're going to go walk. You're going to roll up your sleeves and do some work, like they say, right? Exactly. So anyway, but that's just a side point. Amar Chava, Amar Rav Yehuda, Rav Chava said in Rav Yehuda, Shalosh aronot asab Bitzalel. Anybody who learns Rashi and Chumash is going to be familiar with this. That there were really 3 aronot that Bitzalel made. It wasn't just one. It sounds like one wooden ark that was covered with gold, but in fact there were 3 aronot that were combined together. Gold on the outside, wooden on the inside, gold on the inside, as we all know from learning Rashi our whole lives. So emtzai shel etz. The middle one was made of wood. Tish'a. It was 9 tefachim tall. And then panimi shel zahav, the inner one of gold, the shimona. The inner one was only 8. Why was it 8? Because the actual airspace inside is only 8. I mean, if you have something which is 9 tefachim on the outside, so the floor of it is a tefach. Right? So the first tefach that you see on the outside is really like, if you look at a cup, just to use an example, this is not really part of the liquid because it's really the bottom of the cup here. Right? There's a solid part that's part of the bottom of the cup, and then what's contained is slightly less than that. So that's just an example, not necessarily the best example, but that's why you only need a height of 8 on the outside of the inner aron to cover the space inside, because the actual space inside that wooden aron the height is 8. If you were inside, in other words, you would see a wall of 8. If you're outside, you couldn't actually fit in there because it's only 9 tefachim. But I'm just saying, on the outside you see 9 tefachim, but on the inside you would only see 8 because the floor. All right. Now, in a similar way. So then you have chitzon, the outer golden aron is asara umashehu. Okay, it's 10 and a little bit. It should say, according to the Bach here, chitzon shel zahav. The outer one is also made of gold, but we know that already. It's 10 and a little bit more. Okay, and we'll see why that is in a second. But I mean, logically, we can already understand it, because if you're going to place one inside the other, so you place the 8 inside the 9. You place the 9 and something inside the 10. Right? So the actual 10, it's 10 on the outside, but the inside is not 10. Okay, so it's going to cover the 9, and then maybe a tad bit more. That's what it's saying. Asaro mashu. It's going to cover the 9 and a little bit more, because the 9 will fit into the airspace of the outer one. Okay, so now the Gemara says, Ve'atanya, didn't we learn ahad asaru mashu, that the outside one is actually 11, not 10. Lakasha hakiman damar yesh ba'ovyo tefach, hakiman damar en ba'ovyo tefach. One is going like the side that says at the bottom that the floor of the aron was a tefach, and one is saying that it wasn't a tefach. In other words, if you hold that inner one, the middle one, okay, has a floor of a tefach, an entire tefach, so then what's going to happen? You're going to lose a tefach when you insert it into the 10. You're gonna need another. In other words, if you say that the inside is 10 tefachim, there's 9 tefachim plus another tefach, you're going to need more than what you're going to need if you say that the floor was thin. It was a mashu. Okay, so if you hold that there was actually another tefach in there that had to be covered, that it's going to add to the height of it, so then you're going to need another tefach on the outside to cover that. But if you hold that it's thin, it's a mashehu on the bottom, so then you're not going to need another tefach to cover that on the outside, from the outside aron. It's all going to work out mathematically. So then, umay mashehu, and what is this extra mashehu? Zer. This is the zer. This is the protrusion that's supposed to go around. In other words, the outer aron, everybody agrees, is going to protrude over the other two just a little bit around the side.
That's like zero zahav.
Right, sort of like that. So now, so if you look at Rashi on the side, he gives us a little bit more detail here as to what's happening. So he says that that this extra, when it talks about the 10 and a little bit more, or the 11 and a little bit more, it's counting not only the aron that's inside, but also the kaporet. Okay, the place where the kaporet, where the covering meets the aron, is also going to be covered. Now, if you have, and then a little bit, it's going to protrude over that. Okay, a little bit's going to protrude over that. So this is where we say that zer zahav. This is like a crown. Okay, so and the Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Shilosha zerim hen. There are 3 things that it says have a crown going around. Shel mizbeach, v'shel aron, v'shel shulchan. One is the altar, one is the aron, and one is the table. Shel mizbeach, zacha aharon, untalo. The mizbeach represents the crown of priesthood, of kehuna. Aharon was worthy to get that. Shel shulchan zacha David untalo. The one around the table refers to the crown of kingship, and that was what David took. Shel Aron adain munahu. Kol rotalikach, kol rotelikach, yavo v'ikach. The one that's around the aron, it represents the crown of Torah, and that is waiting for anybody who wants to come take it. So Shema Tomar pachotu. Maybe you'll think it's less, God forbid, than the crown of kingship or the crown of kehuna. No, Talmud Amar bi melachim yimlochu. That's why it says it is through me, wisdom, the wisdom of Torah. This is a famous pasuk in Sefer Mishlei, that through me kings rule. In other words, kingship comes from the wisdom of Torah, and therefore the crown of Torah is the greatest crown of all. Rabbi Yochanan showed a contradiction. Ketiv zar v'karenan zer. On one hand, the word is zer, crown, but it's written as zar, stranger. Zacha naset lo zer. If you're worthy, then the Torah will become a crown for you. But lo zacha zara heimenu. But if you are not worthy, it will be a stranger to you. The Torah will not be your friend. It will not be your crown, but instead will be, as Rashi says, mishtakahat mimenu. You will forget it. Zacha. If you are fortunate enough, lilmod lishma ulekaima. Rashi says, if you learn it lishma, you learn it for the right reasons, it will become a crown for you. You learn it for the wrong reasons because you want to show off, you want to impress women. You're looking for the girls that like a smart guy, or whatever it is. You want to. Then you're doing it for the wrong reason. You're going to forget it. You're only going to remember it as long as. I knew a guy like that. He became religious, and in order to impress a girl, he started learning it. Now he went off the derech completely because it didn't work out. Sometimes it happens. All right. So anyway, Rabbi Yochanan raised a contradiction. I doubt he's going to listen to this lecture because Ketiv v'asita lecha aron etz. It says you should make a wooden aron. And it says they shall make a wooden. So which one is it? Is it Moshe Rabbeinu? Or is it they? Who's they? So what does that teach you? Mikan letamir chacham shebnei iro mitzuvin la'asot lo melachto. That shows you that if there's a Talmid Chacham, the members of his city are obligated or commanded to do his work for him. In other words, they should support the Talmid Chacham. That doesn't mean that the Talmid Chacham doesn't have work. Okay, that's a big difference. It's not saying that Talmid Chacham doesn't work. It's not saying he doesn't have business or he doesn't have a parnasa. What it's saying is that it's incumbent upon others to help him so that he can focus on his learning also. It doesn't mean that he shouldn't have a parnasa. It just means that he should be assisted in the parnasa so that he can focus his energies because it's a benefit to the community to have Talmidei Chachamim. This is a very famous drash that everybody knows again from learning Rashi, right? That it says that from the outside and the inside it should be gold. The aron should be gold. Amar Rava says Kol Talmid Chacham shein tocho kivaro eino Talmid Chacham. Any Talmid Chacham who's inside and outside are not the same. And incidentally, that doesn't mean that he's rotten in and out. That means that he's good in and out. That person is a Talmid Chacham. If he's fake on the outside, he looks like gold. On the inside, he's not gold, or vice versa. Then he is not a Talmid Chacham. And I explained one time that still wood is in the middle, right? You still have wood in the middle. So why do you have three then? Why isn't it just solid gold? Because the answer is even the Talmid Chacham has the Yetzer Hara. Even the Talmid Chacham has the problems, the challenges. He has the physical nature. He has to overcome. He's not perfect, and yet he overlays it inside and outside with gold. If it was solid gold, you think he's an angel. He's not an angel, but he's able to take the same human frailty that we have, and he overlays it with gold inside and out. If it's just on the outside, that's not good. That's just pretending. It has to be for real. In any case. So Abaye v'tamar Rabba bar Ula. So Abaye, and some say it was Rabba bar Ula, said Nikra nitav. He's called despised, like the word to'eva, as it says in the pasuk. It says Av ki nitav v'ne'elah ish shoteh kamayim avla. That the person is despised and rejected, the one who drinks injustice like water. And Rashi says, very interesting, why is this the Talmid Chacham who's inauthentic? Where does it say that it's a Talmid Chacham that's drinking the water? He says, Torah kamayim. Because what is the Torah is always compared to mayim. In mayim ela Torah, right? When it talks about water, it means the Torah. So this person drinks water, but he drinks it avla, unjustly. So therefore, v'yesh bo avla. He has injustice in him. He has corruption in him, and he's drinking the water of Torah. That is not good. He's rejected. He's nitav. Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, he said, Amar Rabbi Yonatan, in the name of Rabbi Yonatan, Mai dichtiv lama ze mechir biyad kesi liknot chokhmah velev ayin. It says, why does this fool have the price in his hand to purchase wisdom, but he has no heart? So what is this referring to? In other words, it means he's going to purchase wisdom, but he doesn't have the ability to take it in because he doesn't have a heart, so to speak. So what does it mean? Woe is to the haters of the Talmidei Chachamim. And again, whenever it says the haters of somebody, it means them. They just didn't want to diss themselves. They didn't want to say, woe is to us, the Talmidei Chachamim, that were so bad. They said, woe is to the haters of the Talmidei Chachamim. She'oskin b'Torah, that they study Torah ve'en b'hen yirat shamayim, but they don't have fear of heaven in them. It's just an academic exercise. That's not good. Machriz Rabbi Yanai says, Chaval al delet darata v'tar'a l'darate avid. Woe is to the person who doesn't have any house, but he makes a gate to walk in. Or no, he doesn't have a courtyard. Rashi says chatzer. He doesn't have a courtyard, but what does he do? He makes a gate to go into his non-existent courtyard. What does Rashi say? What's the purpose of the Torah? To make you a righteous person, to give you yirat shamayim. This person has the gate, but he doesn't have anywhere to go. In other words, he doesn't have the fear of God. It's not perfecting him. It's not bringing him closer to God because he doesn't have yirat shamayim. He doesn't have a desire to come closer to Hashem. It's just an academic exercise, and therefore he has a gate, but the gate doesn't lead to anywhere. It's like the bridge to nowhere. Amar lu Rava l'Rabbanan. Rava said to Rabbanan, "B'matuta minaycho, forgive me." In other words, he's saying, please, by your leave, lo tertun tarte gehinom, don't inherit to hell. Two hells, two gehinom. What does it mean? This is unbelievable. Rashi says, you're going to waste your time studying the Torah in this world and make yourself suffer working hard to learn the Torah. And you won't fulfill the purpose of the Torah because you're just doing it for an academic exercise. So what did you do? So you end up, this is what one of my rabbanim used to say in yeshiva. I used to say, if you're not really going to follow the meaning of the Torah anyway, you're going to suffer in this world and the next world. This world because you're denying yourself all the pleasure of this world. The next world because you didn't really have your heart in learning the Torah either. Right? So you should either choose one. Right? But what he's saying is, you're going to suffer to do the mitzvot in this world. Maybe this is where my teacher got it from, one of the rabbanim in the yeshiva I got it from. Because it says, if you're going to choose to learn Torah and you're going to have such a difficult life in this world, but you're not going to inherit the next world anyway, so what did you gain? You got nothing. Because you didn't get the perfection from learning Torah because you weren't sincere. And you didn't enjoy this world either for what it had to offer because you were focused on learning Torah, so you weren't allowed to eat all bacon cheeseburgers and all that good stuff. So therefore you lost both. So at least make sure you get one. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi says, this is the Torah that Moshe placed. Sam also means a drug or a medicine. Nowadays samim means drugs, but it means a medicine. Zacha nased lo sam chaim. If he is zocher, this is also very famous. Why does the word sam? Sam, if he's fortunate, it becomes an elixir of life, we would say. Lo zacha, if he's not fortunate, na'aset lo samita. Then it becomes a potion of death, a deadly potion. In other words,
means poison.
Right, a poison.
Yeah.
Right. So, v'hainu da'amar Rava, this is what Rava says. De'uman la sama dechaya. That if a person understands it, in other words, he's an expert in it, then it'll be an elixir dechaya. It'll be for life. De la uman la sama de mota. If he's not an expert in it, in other words, if he doesn't do it properly, if he doesn't learn it properly, he doesn't observe it properly, it becomes something that causes him death, which is amazing because, in other words, we say sometimes a little bit of knowledge is not a good thing. A lot of knowledge is a good thing, and no knowledge is a bad thing, but a little knowledge can be even worse because when you think you know, it's even worse than when you know you don't know. When you know and you know, that's good. When you don't know and you don't know, that's also good. But when you don't know and you think you know, that's the worst. Bad combination. So therefore, if you learn Torah and you say, oh, look what a religious guy I am, I'm such a tzaddik, and therefore I can embezzle money and I can sell kidneys on the black market and do all this other stuff, so then you are missing the point and it's becoming a sam mavet. Why? Because the person who uses the Torah itself becomes the thing that drives him into the ground. Because he thinks he's so great because of the Torah that he ends up doing all other kinds of bad things that really destroy his soul and leave him in a very bad condition spiritually. So that's why it can be destructive to know a little bit, because what you see, many people come out arrogant and they think that they're above the law because they're such great Talmidei Chachamim, when in fact they're destroying themselves. So Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani said that Rabbi Yonatan showed a contradiction between two pesukim. It says that the laws of Hashem are straight and they make the heart happy. And it also says Imrat Hashem tzirufa. And it also says that the word of Hashem is tzirufa. it smelts. It pure. In other words, it's something that melts you down. As Rashi says, b'yisurin v'gehinom. It's like a type of suffering. It's an intense suffering that purifies you. So which is true? So he says, Zacha, if a person is worthy, misamahto, it'll make you very happy. The Torah is beautiful. Lo zacha, torafto. If you're not fortunate, it will melt you down. In other words, if you're not on the level to appreciate, if you don't appreciate the Torah, it will go against everything that you think is valuable. Because, in other words, if a person comes with the wrong values and the wrong ideas to learn Torah, then it's going to contradict everything that they know and care about. If they come with the right ideas and the right values, it's going to help them pursue the right things, and it's going to make them really happy. But it's about where you start. They used to say that story that, Olam Haba and Gehinom is the same place. It's an endless shiur by Moshe Rabbeinu. If you're a tzaddik, it's heaven, and if you're a rasha, it's hell. It's the same. You can learn the same thing from the pasuk itself. Imrat Hashem Tzirufa. Why? Because Zacha Tzorafto l'chaim. If you're fortunate, it purifies you l'chaim, for life. In other words, it brings out the best in you. You could say. Lo Zacha Tzorafto l'mita. If you're not worthy, it will burn you for mita, for death. In other words, it will destroy you. You won't be able to, instead of it stimulating and bringing out the best in you, it will reduce you to nothing. Yirat Hashem Torah Omed La'ad, it says that the fear of Hashem is pure and it stands forever. Rabbi Chanina said, Zeh lo Torah b'tahorah. This is the person who learns Torah in purity. What does it mean to learn Torah in a state of purity? It means that you get married first. In other words, if the person is not married first, Rashi says, that if a person doesn't get married first, his mind is on girls all the day, he's trying to learn the Gemara, but he starts thinking about girls, he's thinking about women all the time, and he's very distracted, then he's not really learning b'tahorah. In other words, he can't put his full energy into it because he doesn't have an outlet for his other desires. So you see from, the Talmud is not puritanical. It's not puritanical. It says that you're a human being. Even a Talmid Chacham, he's going to be thinking about women and think about this. Better that you get married, you're settled, you don't have to worry about that, and you can focus on learning. It's b'tahorah.
13 to 18, and you're still learning Torah. What you should be not getting married?
In the Gemara, they used to get married at 14.
And today?
Today, it's a challenge. But listen, nobody's. As much as I don't think it's recommended for a 14-year-old to get married, everybody is aware that those years from 13 to 18 are the worst. Because the teenagers, the hormones are going off the wall, and they don't have any legitimate outlet for it, and they get in all kinds of trouble. And it's absolutely true. I mean, the Gemara had the same experience, but in their culture, they had different expectations. And I think expectations really shape when you grow up in a culture where you're married and working when you're 14 years old. You better be mature when you're 4. There's no playing around. Here, people are an adolescent until they're 30. Their mom's making their bed and doing their laundry at 30 years old, and there's no. That's like they used to say. How do you know one of the reasons that Jesus was Jewish? How do you know? Because he was 33 years old, still living at home, and his mother thought he was God. Anyway. So anyway, let's go further. So the Lavdil. Rabbi Chanina. So all right. So that's it. So Edut Hashem Ne'emana. The testimony of Hashem is true. Is trustworthy. Amar Rabbi Chaya bar Abba. Rabbi Chaya bar Abba said Ne'emana hi laha'id b'lo that it is trustworthy. What does it mean? To testify against or for those who learn it. And what does Rashi say? Mi kiem umi lo kiem. In other words, you know a person's a real Talmid Chacham or not. If somebody comes and says, hello, I'm a Talmid Chacham, they're probably not. In other words, the Torah speaks for itself. You can see who is a person of Torah, who's not a person of Torah. They don't have to. It's not something that you need to argue. Finally, Ma'aseh rokem Ma'aseh choshev. So it says Ma'aseh rokem Ma'aseh choshev, that it's sometimes it says embroidered work, sometimes it says choshev. Amar Elazar sherokamin b'makom shechoshavin, that they shirokamin, that they embroider in the place where they calculate. So Rashi says, "Batchila mitaken tzura ala beged." First, they would make, in other words, like almost like a stencil, you can imagine. But I mean, I don't know how really sewing works. But I've seen the ladies, they sew like those kippot and stuff. I've never done it. But they first had a form that they would follow, and then. In other words, when it says Ma'aseh Choshev, it means that they would set up what the design was supposed to look like. And then Ma'aseh Rokem means that they would actually L'Ma'aseh implement it. Tana, it says, Mishmei de Rabbi Nehemiah, and then Rabbi Nehemiah, Rokem maaseh machat lefikach partzuf achat. When it says maaseh rokem, that was done with a needle, so it only shows from one side. But choshev maaseh oreg lefikach shtei partzufot. But when it says maaseh oreg, it means that that it's going to show from both sides because it's something that's done in weaving. So Rashi explains on the side, sheyesh la lirash shtei kirot v'shtei tzurot al shtei kirotea ein domot zo lazo, that you can actually make shemitzad ze ari u'mitzad ze nesher. So when it says maaseh oreg, it means that since it was woven and it was woven on two sides, so therefore you could have on one side an eagle and on one side a lion. But when you're sewing, in other words, when it says Maseh Rokem, the embroidery, it was only one thing, and you would see the back of it on the other side. You wouldn't be able to make two faces, one on either side. So whenever the Torah says Maseh Oreg, it means something that was thick, that had two, depending on what side you look at, you would see something else. When it talks about Maseh Rokem, it means something that, like a patch, that you would see on one side, you see the face of it, and on the other side, you would see the bottom of it. You wouldn't see the same thing or a different thing reflected on the other side.